I am a fighter and not a quitter.
I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Just a balls up of monumental proportions.
The 19th of October 2022 will forever live in infamy for the Conservative Party. That's because it's the day the short term of Liz Truss as Prime Minister fell apart in front of the watching public. Although they would hold on to power for 2 more years, for many people this was the beginning of the end of the Tory government, who had been in power for over a decade. But this story really begins a month earlier. That's because on the 23rd of September, Kwarteng unveiled his mini-budget that would crash the UK economy. A day later, the pound hit an all-time low against the dollar, whilst mortgage rates soared.
Mini-budget is a complete misnomer. It was absolutely extraordinary in terms of its impact, and the bond market went absolutely nuts. It was doing like a tarantella. The bond market was just like flying all over the place, like Strictly Come Dancing.
By the time we come to the 19th of October, pressure is already starting to become unbearable for the Prime Minister. Kwarteng had been sacked as Chancellor, and letters of no confidence were being submitted against Liz Truss. Adding to this, Home Secretary Suella Braverman had resigned from the government. And then we come to the fracking vote.
This vote was quite an odd one. It was on what's called an opposition day motion, which is, they happen periodically. The opposition party, which was then Labour, got a vote and they get to choose what the vote's on, right? And traditionally, the government will let them win because it's a sort of Pyrrhic victory. It doesn't really mean anything, it's not binding, it's just embarrassing to the government. But in this case, Truss and her close team decided to make it a confidence motion, which is like the sort of nuclear button of votes, meaning that if her own side, the Tories, voted against it, then it would be a motion of confidence in the government as a whole, and therefore the government could fall. And that decision to make it a confidence vote was the first in the series of dominoes that fell and ultimately led to Liz Truss's downfall.
At the start of the day, Liz Truss came out very strongly at PMQs.
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter. I have acted in the national interest to make sure that we have economic stability.
But as the day progressed, things started to go wrong for the government. Just 2 hours after PMQs, Tory MP and Vice Chair of the 1922 Committee of Tory Backbenchers, William Ragg, made a damaging speech in the Commons.
What occurred with that financial statement, I am personally ashamed, because I cannot go and face my constituents, look them in the eye, and say that they should support our great party, and the polls would seem to bear that out. The next debate is apparently a confidence issue. Well, I'm not going to fall into that trap.
Fearing the size of a possible rebellion, Downing Street told Climate Minister Graham Stewart that the vote was not going to be treated as a matter of confidence.
Quite clearly, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not a confidence vote, but it is an attempt by Her Majesty's. It is obviously, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not a confidence vote. What it is an attempt. What it is an attempt. Let me try. Order.
But all this did was to add to the growing sense of confusion and chaos among Tory MPs over whether this was a confidence vote.
I think at about 11 in the morning, it was a confidence motion. Then in the afternoon, it wasn't a confidence motion. Then it was a confidence motion again. By the time they went through the lobbies, no one was really clear, even the Chief Whip.
And I just couldn't understand why this has blown up into such a big issue as to being a confidence vote. Now of course, the Conservative Party was scarred from 2018 and 2019 with Brexit, with Labour trying to take over the order paper. So, and this is what the Labour Party was trying to do on this occasion. But we did have a majority of about 80. I mean, it was impossible to imagine that this was going to succeed. But somehow the government, Liz Truss's government, got into its head that there was a genuine threat here. And that's why I just simply couldn't believe the meltdown that occurred in front of us.
And then comes the actual vote. The Tories win by a majority of 96, which is actually more than their working parliamentary majority. But despite winning with a clear margin, the chaos was still far from over.
So when MPs go in to vote, They divide left and right, yes and no. And as a journalist, you're not allowed to go anywhere near. You've got to stand outside so you don't get caught up in the voting, basically. But very soon after the doors are unlocked, you can go in and talk to people again. And what I found was just absolute chaos. People with their mouths open, some in tears, some just sort of standing around in little knots, like a kind of, in the sort of aftershock of a kind of major event. And I remember talking to a cabinet minister and said, this government's collapsing. And they just had their sort of mouth hanging open like a goldfish. It was just absolute chaos. Wendy Morton, who was Liz Truss's chief whip, as she went through, Wendy Morton said, I resign. And I remember having eyewitnesses telling me this. Liz Truss reached out for Wendy Morton's arm and sort of tried to grab her. And the pair vanished, but in the kind of chaos, neither of them voted on a motion that was a confidence motion, or was it a confidence motion? No one really knew at that point.
But that wasn't the only problem the Tories had in the voting lobbies. Labour MP Chris Bryant claimed that Tories were bullying and physically manhandling MPs to try and force them to vote with the government.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I would urge you to launch an investigation into the scenes outside the entrance to the No lobby earlier. I saw members being physically manhandled into another lobby and being bullied.
Although a later Speaker's inquiry found that there was no evidence of bullying, Charles Walker wasn't happy with what he saw.
Well, so, I mean, I was sitting in the chamber talking to a colleague and this row broke out around the Speaker's chair and we both thought, what the hell's going on here? It all looks a bit heated. And then I came out to see a sort of maelstrom of unhappiness. And it was just extraordinary. And I saw a colleague flee from the division lobby in tears. So I followed her to the library and asked her what was going on, and she explained she was a young colleague. And I said, okay, I'll go and sort this out. And so I went into central lobby, Freudian slip there, central lobby, and gave an interview to the BBC, which was widely reported and covered, and I guess it's why you've got me here today to be interviewed, giving my reflections. I think it's a shambles and a disgrace. I think it is utterly appalling.
So you seem quietly
I'm livid. And you know, I really shouldn't say this, but I hope all those people that put Liz Truss in number 10, I hope it was worth it. I hope it was worth it for the ministerial red box. I hope it was worth it to sit round the cabinet table, because the damage they have done to our party is extraordinary. It was a very deliberate action.
So no regrets?
Absolutely none at all. It was deliberate, and it was calculated, and it needed to be done. I was absolutely embarrassed, and I was fed up being embarrassed as a Conservative Member of Parliament. Bluntly, I do think that the British public, the great electorate, deserved better.
And despite years having gone by, Charles still seems to be in disbelief about what happened that day.
I mean, it was straight out of in the thick of it. And to me, it just demonstrated, if I'm allowed to use the word, how crap the Conservative Party had become at almost everything. So all you've got to understand is the government carried the day by 96 votes. So it held a metaphorical revolver to the parliamentary party, then turned it on itself. It's one of the greatest own goals of all time. Yeah, it wasn't even an accidental own goal. It was like every outfield player touched the ball on the way to putting it into the back of their own net. It was extraordinary. Just a balls up of monumental proportions.
The 19th of October was one of the most chaotic days in parliamentary history. Despite winning the vote, Liz Truss's position became untenable. The very next day, she went from
I am a fighter and not a quitter
to
I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
and that's how she became the shortest serving Prime Minister